Kachmann, welcome to our show today. This, I think, is possibly could be very important in your life because a tremendous number of people have diabetes, especially type 2. And I'll tell you the difference in a minute, but type 2 diabetes especially has so many diseases associated with that. That's the reason, partly because of my passion. I have a half-hour show on this every 2 weeks, and I've had it for years. And I'm trying to teach you how to prevent it, stop it, and reverse it. And the reason why is, let's discuss this for a minute here. Prevent, stop, reverse diabetes. Let me hold this up. I would like for you to get a copy of it if we can by personally contacting me, and I email it to you, or I'm at the Divine Cafe on Fridays at 11:30. I'll have extra copies there. Or you could go online and get a book. I'm not here about book sales, but I want you to get rid of diabetes, and I'll show you why in a minute. Is that to the point the hospitals aren't doing it, we doctors aren't doing it, the government's not doing it, pharmacies are not doing it, that I've declared a war on diabetes. But my bullets and tanks are information and a big hug. I'm going to hand you information because you can get rid of it 90% of the time in about a month. Yes, I've done it many times. And you wonder why the community is not 100% embracing it and doing it. Partly because I think sugar's addictive. We're addicted to it. A lot of patients don't want to give it up. But again, it's the responsibility of us doctors and providers to help you with it. It's up to us. Many people don't know that you can get rid of it so quickly. Let me read to you a little bit here off this sheet, which incidentally has a QR code at the bottom too, right there, which leads to so much information that it will overwhelm you. You could just take a little bit at a time, listen to my YouTube shows or Facebook about 10 minutes. The shows, you can turn them off anytime, but they're about an hour long, going back many 20 years probably. But diabetes causes at least 200 different things, but let's just discuss the most common ones that I have on here. Blindness, you can't see. A lot of people lose their vision because of diabetes. Cataracts, retinal disease, glaucoma, I can go on and on. Part of the reason is the eye has the second smallest blood vessels. The ear has the smallest. First sign of 90% of difficulty hearing. It's not our age, it's diabetes. Older people more likely to get it. So we're going to lose a little bit of hearing as we get older, but because of these small blood vessels, insulin bores a hole in the small vessels that starts the arteriosclerotic process. And since the vessels are so small, they're affected very easily. Meniere's disease, all types of diseases due to diabetes, 90% of the time. Hardly anybody knows that. So to prevent this chronic disease is critical to good hearing. Mental disease, dementia. Most of Alzheimer's disease, you think it's a genetic disease and you inherited it from Uncle so-and-so. 80% of the time or so, 70% of the time, it's due to diabetes. It's due to insulin resistance. It can be prevented the majority of the time. Yet the Alzheimer's Association is not telling you that. They're just raising funds for the organization. And that's what causes your disease. They don't even know. It's in many books. It's in many books. So you can prevent it. Another one, incidentally, that causes memory loss and mental dysfunction and Parkinson's disease and ALS and all these diseases are statin drugs. I had a TV show on that here a little while ago. You can find it on YouTube. Or you can read this book, so I'll show you. I didn't tell you to stop it. I didn't tell you to start it. But you need to gather some information. The industry has overwhelmed us with taking these drugs that there's so much over-prescription of them. But I just hold up one of the books, The Dark Side of Statins. That's it. And many other books. Look at my website, look at my YouTube. Don't stop it or start it because of what I said. Start it or stop it because of what you read, and show the books to your doctor. He wants to give you a script, show him the book. But unless you do that, he's just not going to want to spend a lot of time on it because he hasn't read those books. And if they've read those books, majority of the time, it wouldn't prescribe it. Statins stop the mevalonic pathway right below acetyl-CoA, and that's the path to 5 other metabolic pathways. You can stop so many diseases. So there's an important one. Gum disease. Bacteria love to eat sugar. So if you have diabetes, you have much more gum disease. And you see it in children. Tell your kids to brush their teeth multiple times a day and use mouthwash because these bacteria are sugar eaters. And if you're diabetic, guess what you got in your body? More sugar. Incidentally, while I'm on the subject, the viruses, the coronavirus going around, and other viruses, monkeypox, other viruses that come along, they're sugar eaters. There's no metabolic system. They will enter a human or animal cell and steal sugar, genetic structure, and they mutate quickly. That's why the virus is changing. Did Dr. Fauci or Democrats or Republicans or government tell you that? No, I'm telling you that. It's in many books. It's not. The virus is a sugar feeder. Viruses take about 13 as much sugar to metabolize themselves. It's just like what's called the Warburg effect, just like cancer. That was discovered in the 1930s, the Otto Warburg effect. Cancer is a sugar eater. The viruses are sugar eaters. Learn more about that. Thyroid disease, heart attacks, strokes, liver disease, renal disease. Most kidney disease is from diabetes. 70-80% is from diabetes. There's 5 stages to it, okay? Stage 1, 2, and 3, people have no symptoms, but yet does your doctor check you for a GFR, glomerular filtration rate? Have that done. You have no symptoms, but if you slowly have declining GFR, and you go to stage 4 kidney disease, now you have symptoms, they say, oh, you need to be dialyzed. Stage 5, you need a kidney transplant, and your lifespan may be decreasing. It is decreasing. So to check your GFR, very important, starting at a young age. A lot of kids now have diabetes. If your child's overweight, 90% chance they're diabetic. Their blood sugar is normal. They're not diabetic. No, get a serum insulin. Insulin is elevated long, 10, 15 years before the sugar goes up. So you catch your child or yourself on the way to diabetes, you need to lose 5 or 10 pounds, and the diabetes may be gone. If you wait till the blood sugars are elevated, you may need to lose 100 pounds. You see the difference? It's a lot easier. I think children should be screened for diabetes with serum insulins and blood sugar starting at age 3. Why is that? Because the next book I'm going to discuss with you, The Diabetic Epidemic in You by Joseph Kraft, says so. He did the scientific studies. This is the Bible of diabetes. Hardly ever meet a doctor who ever read the book. I've dropped it off at doctors' offices, and I come back a month later, and they still haven't read it. That's happened to me. I took it to a pediatrician in town, who's the main pediatrician for one of the main hospital assistants in town, and the second time he went in there, he still hadn't read it. Yet, he's a pediatrician. How do you explain that? I have no answer. Okay, but I'm at it. I don't look back. I look forward. So, amputations, dislocations, is all seen with diabetes. I know one family in town, very well-known family. You wouldn't know the name, where the dad, the mother, two of the kids now have had legs amputated because of diabetes, but they don't want to do anything about it. And the leaders of the community, how do you figure that? I attended the funeral services. What I hear one of them say now, he says, well, I respect diabetes. I would take the medications. If you take the medications, that'll drop your blood sugar, but all insulin does is stuff sugar into the cells, and your cells still get the sugar. That'll have tremendous effects on your body, okay? What you want is not to get the disease in the first place, and I know how to teach you to get rid of diabetes in a few weeks the majority of the time. A type 1 diabetic is one whose pancreas has died, cannot produce insulin. What does that? Maybe a virus, autoimmune disease where your own body attacks the pancreas, but also milk drinkers and people who can't tolerate gluten, proteins can destroy their own pancreas, and many other reasons. So there are actually reasons for that. It's not just some unpredictable disease. So, but if you have that, you need insulin. But if you eat right, you won't need much insulin, maybe 10 or 20 units, and you probably live to be 100. But if you're eating bad food all the time, then you'll get type 2 type diabetes with it, and your lifespan will be shortened, okay? Type 1 diabetics who eat a good, nutritious diet, which I'll describe to you before the show is over. You'll need very little insulin because you're not eating a lot of sugar. You're eating good fats, 65%, 70%. And you live a long life. Insulin does more than stuff sugar into the cells. It makes arteries stiff, increased rates of cancer. It causes other diseases. So you don't want to have much insulin in your life. Bowel disease. Half the heart attacks, people grab their chest and they die. No warning, no angina, nothing. So you want nothing to do with this disease if you can help it, okay? And let me look at another book for you. Joseph Kraft, K-R-A-F-T, Diabetes Epidemic in You. He was a pathologist. He looked at the bottom line. He looked to see what diabetes did to your body. University of Illinois, about 1990s or so, and wrote many papers, and then finally published one, 2006. Diabetic epidemic in you. Should everyone be tested? Remember I talked about the insulin? Absolutely not. Only those concerned about their future. Only concerned about their future. At the beginning of my Rudy's War on Diabetes, on the very first chapter, I refer to him, and you can see him on YouTube, Joseph Kraft, K-R-A-F-T. YouTube show. He's 92 years old, talking to an obesity expert, and he's died since that time, okay? But he said, Dr. Joseph Kraft is watching us from above. This is from my book, okay? I've watched Dr. Kraft's YouTube presentation many times, and I encourage you to do the same. He's being interviewed by Dr. Cummings, and they're discussing Dr. Kraft's research and scientific papers, which are the basis of a lot of my discussion. At that time, Dr. Kraft was 92 years old, and I said, and he said, I'll be looking down on you from above for a long time before the nation and the world will adopt the necessary changes to win this war on diabetes. That's why I call it Rudy's War on Diabetes. He declared war on it, and I think he's watching this presentation today. So number one is I'd like you not to get diabetes in the first place. Some of our bodies are more sensitive than others. Some can eat anything they want to and they never get diabetes, but the majority of the people, high percentage of the people, some racial groups, 90% of the people get diabetes very easily. It's partly based on the history, maybe a little bit in genetics, maybe because they were slaves and they had to eat sugar cane as the only food was available to them, and their genes changed a little bit. But this is not largely a genetic disease. It is 90% as to what you eat. And what I recommend. The other TV show that I did today about sugar in history, and we find out that even in Antarctica, the Indians, natives going back hundreds of years, are 90% fat eaters. They get the fat from the buffalo, the caribou, and from the candlefish in the Pacific. 90% saturated fats, monosaturated fats, and they'd store it, and it could last a year or two. And so in history, we were mainly fat eaters. And for 50 years in our country, the government, the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, the legislation all told us that fat was bad, we should eat a high sugar diet. Well, the high sugar diet has made all of us sick and overweight. That's why our hospitals are full. Our biggest industry in this town, hospitals. And it's going to get even worse because they're not changing. In essence, I'm fighting the whole system. Some patients are joining me, but the big leaders of the community, they're all getting lobbying money, they're getting pharmaceutical money, or maybe they just don't know better. But I do not put up with that because you want those 200 diseases? Well, then eat a high sugar diet. You don't want that? Eat about 65, 70% good fats, guacamole, olives, ghee butter, for example, and now I saw in the paper today that you can get many different forms of the guacamole, for example, now to make many different types of meals. It has good fats in them, and when you eat like this for breakfast, say your blood sugar does not get elevated, and a very even line. You probably don't even need to eat till lunch or so. If you fast a little, and give that more time, the blood sugar will go down, insulin will go down, and fat cells will open up, and the fat will go to the liver. It turns into ketones, so you're living up of ketones. Ketones are like molecules of sugar, except they're fats, and the brain loves them. It makes you feel much more energetic, and your weight will go away, and your diabetes will be gone 2, 3 to 4 weeks. That quick. Yes, that quick. But you got to act on it. Remember I said certain racial groups, ethnic groups have a much higher rate of diabetes, and they're dying much younger. I know somebody at Loma Linda University, at the Gundry, I think it is, that he went to Los Angeles and could find certain ethnic and racial groups, hardly anybody alive past age 70. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not because they're different color or ethnic groups, it's what they're eating. And it must change. And we need leadership. I need big-time leaders to wrap their mind around it. Now, we used to think, vegetables and fruit and all that's great. Well, vegetables are okay, but fruit has fructose in it. Fructose is metabolized by the liver and turned into fat and affects the kidney. very little used for energy versus, and so a high fructose diet is a straight path to insulin resistance and diabetes. So you want to know the fructose content of the food, and it's a bit sweeter than regular glucose, and you may be seeking it more. High fructose corn syrup is significantly sweeter. They put it in drinks. Sugary drinks account for about 50% of people that weigh a great deal. Cut out the sugary drinks. It's a good step in the right direction, but it's not enough. And then, remember I said 60-70% good fats, and we need some protein. But if you eat too much protein, which a lot of weightlifters do, is that your body needs a certain amount of protein from what breaks down every day. 80% comes from your body, 20% you take in, because some of those essential proteins that your body doesn't make, so you need to take this in. But if you take in too much protein, it gets converted to sugar. Just like regular sugar, yeah. And so protein is not a total answer, but you need a certain amount. But if you had a breakfast, say, composed of 70-80% good fats, 20% protein, and a few berries, fine. A little bit of fruit now and then is fine. Kind of like this food pyramid, which I've put up for you, which also is in my Rudy Shore and Diabetes book. You begin to understand what you should be eating. And as I already mentioned, in history, we always should look at history. We actually ate 80-90% fat diet. The Indians did, the ancients did, the primates 2 million years ago, the primate animals, not humans, they mainly would kill animals, and that is the way they survived for millions of years. We didn't start eating a lot of carbohydrates till about 8,000 years ago, when we started having agriculture. We started growing tubers and different foods. There was some available beforehand, but not at the rate that we could build a whole plant of potatoes, for example. And a potato is okay, but it's mainly a carbohydrate and mainly a sugar, although the skin can be a lot better. So I would suppose you got a big weight problem, and I'm catching, and this is where you add and say, I want to get rid of my diabetes. There's an excellent book here by Susan Ryan, Beyond Simply Keto. You can get on the internet, see how beautiful she is. She lost 125 pounds. In this book, she spent the first 30, 40 pages explaining, remember ketones, those are small molecules of good fats, which were used for energy by the brain. Glucose is great for the brain, but you don't need to be totally glucose. You can be 70-80% ketones, and the brain will work a lot better. And in her book, she then has pictures of her recipes. She even tells you the amount of time, the amount of carbohydrates, the amount of protein, the amount of fat in them. So you know that. And I think you follow it, say, only her book, and you're 100 pounds or more overweight, I think you could get rid of all that in about a month. Mm-hmm. Simply Keto by Susan Ryan, in about a month. And the recipes are wonderful. She has desserts in there, and she has for 3 meals, but to speed things up, go to 2 meals. Yeah, go to 2 meals, which I do, and no particular reason. I weigh 133 pounds. I don't need to do that. I didn't always eat good. My dad had a deli in New York. I know what bad food is, believe me. But if you go to 2 meals, breakfast, lunch together, 11 or 12, somewhere in there, and eat again at 6, that'll increase the speed of your weight loss quickly, and your diabetes and your secondary diseases will just disappear. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, yes, I've had many patients do it, because when I take a walk, say, at Promenade Park, every time, there'll be 2 or 3 people come up to me who say they saw my show, they read one of my books, and they look at me, and look at them, they look like movie stars, and all the disease, yeah, I lost 30 pounds, and my diabetes is gone, and you're saving me a lot of money. These drugs cost money. And it's hard to believe that companies can sell like insulin for you to take to push the sugar in the cell. Some people need it. Type 1 diabetics need it. But a lot of people, wherever you give the insulin shot, a bump forms. Why is that? Because the cell's getting big. It's full of sugar. The sugar's still in you. I want to get rid of the sugar by not eating it, by eating good fats. And you find that in the morning, I don't feel like I have to eat. I have a cup of coffee, that's fine. Water, tea, that's fine. Why is that? Because my blood sugar is like that. Why is that? It's called circadian rhythm. As morning approaches and it gets a little bit of light, our body, because senses it and starts secreting glucagon, which raises the blood sugar, some steroids, because the day is approaching, raises the blood sugar, growth hormone in the pituitary raises the blood sugar, so the blood sugar is like this. That's why I'm not hungry. And I drink some coffee, which must secrete some serotonin because it makes me feel better. And it sure as heck is working for me, because I had all my blood work checked a week ago. And I tell you, my blood sugar was 89, my HSCRP, that's the best heart test, was 0.7, which my GGT, which insurance companies, as a liver test, use to test how long you're going to live, because that's how they sell life insurance, and it determines the price, was like 3, when the normal range is like 2 to 70. Could I get hit by a truck and not be around tomorrow? That's for sure. But at least I'm doing, what I can do, and I'm not doing it to brag. I teach, and the teacher, in my opinion, should exemplify what he's teaching, just to be sure that it works. So I like to look at some of these materials, read some of these materials. One of the best books that I've read is Goodbye Pills and Needles. If you're a diabetic, you want to get rid of your pills and needles, read this book. I really think this is a great book by Tom Jelinek. It's on Amazon. To me, as well as a craft book and my own book, they indeed are Bibles. And because I want you to live to be 100 and play pickleball with me, or tap dance with me, and say, thanks, Doc, I get rid of diabetes. I just want to say hello to you. I'm doing this because I love you. Thanks for listening. Namaste. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.